Hey everyone, Andrew here, bringing you another video. And today we're going to be continuing Pokemon Week with Generation 2 of Pokemon. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any of my cartridges available to show you. All my cartridges for Generation 2 are missing. I don't know where they've gone. They probably just got lost in translation when I was moving my room or something. Or my friends probably took them from me, because I did have some people that stole some of my Pokemon games. But anyways, in Generation 2 we have Gold, Silver, and Crystal versions. And in my opinion, Generation 2 is probably the most hyped out of all the generations, especially for its time, because up to this point we only had Generation 1. Duh. But it's a completely new generation, a completely new breed of Pokemon with new concepts, new ideas, and a whole new land. It was hyped up so big, and it was something that was exciting for the people that lived and played the games at the time. I remember during this time, a lot of my friends and I would talk about the hidden Pokemon and Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow. Everyone did it. Talked about mysterious fake Pokemon. And a lot of them we also talked about with the Generation 2. Like, for example, Marill, which is a water type in Generation 2. Everyone in my school thought it was called Pikablue, a blue Pikachu. That was just a water Pikachu. I don't know if anyone else did that, but, we did that with some of the Generation 2 Pokemon that we saw. So, in my opinion, Generation 2 was one of the most hyped up generations because it's, well, a new one. It was completely new for a lot of people. New Pokemon, new ideas, new place. On to the general concept of Generation 2. Generation 2, as with all the Pokemon games, follow the same concept of Generation 1. Catch your Pokemon, train them, fight Elite Four, fight bad guys. The basic story in this is that you're in the new land of Johto with 100 new Pokemon to deal with. Team Rocket is all but gone, but there's still some remnants trying to rebuild the organization. You get to fight through Johto League, and you also get to go back to Kanto and deal with the previous Kanto trainers. This game, or this generation, is set 3 years after the original one. So there's a lot of things that change in Kanto over those 3 years. In addition to that, you can also fight the old protagonists from the previous game, Red. See, all the protagonists have different names, like Red or Sapphire and Silver and all those stuff. Some of them have legitimate names too, and some of these actually get transitioned and translated over into the Pokemon anime. For example, Red is an example of Ash. There you go. Or Sapphire is an example of May, but we're not talking about the anime. Let's talk about the Pokemon first. We get 100 new Pokemon, and we also get 2 new types, Dark and Steel. And on a whole, the Pokemon that come out of Johto is a mixed bag for me, because with those, you get some Pokemon that look good, and we're talking cosmetically here. Some Pokemon that look good, like Blissey, Crobat, Tyranitar, so on and so forth. Those Pokemon look good, but then you got some bad, ugly-looking Pokemon. So it's kind of a mixed bag. When it comes down to the actual Pokemon themselves, how well they perform in gameplay, Generation 2 has some good Pokemon. There's a lot of good Pokemon that came from this that are still used in later generations, but not as good as the previous generations. In Generation 1, the starters were heavy hitters. By today's standards, the only really good starter from Generation 1 is Charizard. The other ones are kind of meh. But in Generation 1, these starters were heavy hitters. In Generation 2, the starters are okay. Even by today's standards, they're not used that much. So you can see that the Pokemon aren't quite as good as the previous versions Pokemons or the previous generations, but there are some gems in there. And on a whole, you get the 2 new typing of Dark and Steel, which help combat against some of the more powerful types from the previous generation. Psychic types ruled the previous generation in Generation 1. But now you have Dark types that utterly destroy them. We also get some new features. For example, Pokemon can hold items now, and those items can affect how the Pokemon play. Some Pokemon get powers powered up, their abilities get powered up, or they can have berries that will restore health, or status effects, among other things. You also get genders in Pokemon and breeding, which is a huge part of Pokemon today to today's standards. You get the shining Pokemon concept, which is, you have a chance of getting a shiny Pokemon. You also get the happiness of Pokemon increased and used more. For example, in Yellow version, you can have Pikachu and keep him happy, but it really didn't affect the gameplay that much. But you have a Golbat and you're trying to make it happy, it'll eventually evolve. And it can only evolve through happiness. So you get the addition of happiness. You also get new Pokeballs too. I believe 7 new Pokeballs, and you can make them also. So you see that this was a bit added to the Pokemon gameplay. Also, you get day and night. Certain Pokemon only come out during the night, some only come out during the day. On a whole, how does Generation 2 stack up to the previous generation and in generations in general? See, I'm really torn with Generation 2 because I feel as though it's kind of one of the weakest. It has some good going for it, like some Pokemon that are usable in battle and competitive battle, and it does add a lot to Pokemon that is important to later games. Breeding, gender, happiness, various different Pokemon. There's a lot that gets added to it. But at the same time, the game kind of feels rushed. Or it feels like an add-on to the previous games. It doesn't feel like a completely new world. The graphics aren't that much different. And on a whole, the gameplay doesn't change that much other than the few things that I listed. Generation 2 for me, I would put as one of the weaker generations. Just for the fact that it feels like another add-on. That doesn't mean it's not fun, but the other problem with Generation 2 is that it's completely dwarfed by its remakes. But you can say that about Generation 1. Like I said, the biggest problem I have with Generation 2 is you get a mixed bag of Pokemon that you have some that are good and some that are meh, and it just feels like another addition onto the previous generation. It doesn't feel like a completely new Pokemon game. It doesn't feel that much updated from the previous generation either. So I am going to have to say Generation 2 wasn't as good. It really wasn't good in general. But it did add a lot to the Pokemon series that you cannot ignore that is important to the previous or the future generations. So on a whole, Generation 2 was necessary, but it really wasn't that good. That said, I'm going to end this video here. This is Andrew saying peace out for now.